When did they issue a warrant?
So what happened is we have to take you to our warrant room for that information to get entered, and then after that gets entered, before we can take you to the jail, to the local jail.
Okay, because I didn't know there was a warrant. How would I know that?
Well, we wouldn't have been.
You wouldn't know that, Donna. Donna, they're not going to tell you have a warrant. You were fleeing to a non-extradition country. They're not going to tell you, honey. They're not going to tell you about that warrant when you're fleeing.
Aren't they supposed to inform me if there was a warrant for me?
Donna, sweetheart, they're not going to inform you. You're a criminal now. You're not a fancy lady no more. You're a criminal. Sorry, Donna. It's all over. It's all over. You're in cuffs. Do you get it? You get it? She still doesn't get it. She's in La La Land. I'm sorry. You are listening to the Roberta Glass True Crime Report, putting the true back in true crime. From New York City, Roberta Glass is now on the record. Okay, how is everybody? Big day. Donna's big hearing turned out to be, well, a little bit of a nothing burger, as I predicted. And it looks like she's going to push on for a speedy trial. Shocking, at least for now, until they ask for a delay. So I was on Kick today, streaming the hearing. And it was just a Zoom hearing. Donna was a postage stamp at the top of the screen in a mask. And what we know is that we have a September 30th start date to the trial. But more interesting to me was that mask. Going to talk a little bit about that, a little bit about my Super Bowl party yesterday, how it gave me some insight into this case, and talk a little bit about Ruth Markel and her book. That's what's on the agenda today. But before we get into that, let's look at your comments. Last time I was talking about Wendi and her trolling of lawyer and true crime author Stephen Epstein. And he was making the argument that Wendi has great qualities because Dan loved her. And I was saying that great people fall in love with horrible people, and vice versa all the time. So Jennifer McIntyre says, horrible, narcissist, manipulative, evil people almost exclusively seek out good, empathetic, loving people because they have an undeniable advantage over their mate. They have little to no success in dominating another evil person because the relationship would implode before it went on for very long. Narcissists seek empaths because they can get away with everything they want to do and drag them down on their knees to feed their dark souls. Pretty interesting. Also, I always think that there's a bit of jealousy between people, but between narcissists who really envy a bit and sometimes look down upon the way that they're so feeling and are so good with people. Pretty interesting. William T. Thurlow says, 6675 says, Roberta, love your show, but I can't take any more references to banana bread. Thank you, William. Point taken. Maybe we're going to have to give out rounds of paella to everyone. I will take that into consideration. Note taken. Point taken. MM says, Donna better not play the age card at her trial. Ruth is old too, meaning Ruth Markel, and every day she has to wake up knowing her only son has been murdered by Donna and her crew, and that Wendi hasn't been arrested yet, and she's alienated from Dan's children because of Wendi. Great point, MM. I hate when people say in this case, well, 2 families were destroyed, or people will talk about the Markels getting closure. There is no closure. It's a life sentence of grief. It can get better, but there is no resolution to this kind of grief. And it's not the same as having family members in prison, alive and in prison. And I know a trial is stressful. Got some insight into the kosher food. So last night I didn't have a show because my boyfriend had some of his friends over for his Super Bowl party. And as you know, I do my show in a small New York apartment. It would have been crazy to drive to do a show with a Super Bowl party going on. And 2 of the guests were kosher. So the husband in this couple was married couple was very much like Dan Markel. When they got married, he wasn't so observant Jew, but as time moved on, he got more and more observant. And the kosher food, the wife is eating kosher with him, but not when it's up to her. It sounds like she is a lot looser. But we had to get kosher pizza, a kosher oven. They brought kosher snacks. We had to get plates that were paper plates, meaning unused. So what kosher is you can't mix milk and meat, but there's also, you can't eat on plates that have had milk or meat on them. Do you get what I'm saying? So it is so extensive. I think when Wendi gave the testimony that it is kosher-style, that our wedding was kosher-style. For those that don't know, the problems in this marriage started at the wedding when Wendi and Donna did not have kosher food at the wedding. So that Dan's rabbi looked at the food, meaning it had to either be milk and meat mixed, or meat and dairy mixed, or it had to be some non-kosher kinds of food served, or it was served in a non-kosher way. So something that he could pick up on visually and left. And that was devastating to Dan. Oh, it's Miss Lisa. Thank you, Kosher-style, Roberta. It's Miss Lisa says. Thank you. Yes, I was not doing kosher-style. I was trying to really make these guests comfortable and have kosher food available. So we drank out of plastic glasses. We had plastic silverware available. We had paper plates, but of course we forgot paper bowls, and they brought chips and salsa. So we had to serve the salsa on a plate. So what I learned yesterday, to give you the cliff notes, is that we talk about kosher food being something you can just get and it's so easy. And I know I mentioned this before, having talked to someone who had kosher food at her wedding, and she brought this up, that it's really difficult. It is very involved. There was one moment last night when the pizza went cold, And my boyfriend was talking about putting it in the oven to warm it up. And one of our guests who's Jewish said to him, if you put it in the oven, it's not going to be kosher anymore. And we were very thankful for that tip, but it is a thing. It is not as simple as, you just serve it. It has to do with the dishes, the way, right, the oven it's cooked in. So it could have been worked out. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it would have been a challenge. And it is a challenge, I know, in this couple's marriage that we had over last night. And it is a thing that couples can break up over. It's a challenge. It's a commitment to do. That is the message I'm trying to relate. So I wanted to share my interview with Ruth Markel. Not many people even are aware that I did this interview. This is what got me interested in this case, was when Ruth Markel's book came out. I got a communication from her publicist, and this is when I became aware of the case. So I wanted to start with this interview and share it with you guys, where Ruth Markel talks about the issues with the food. Let me make sure I'm at the right. I think I'm right on for the right on. Right. I'm close to queued up. All right. Here we go. Maybe a little behind.
But Donna, let's talk about Donna separate from Jeffrey for a minute. Look, Donna started on J-Date, and I told you one thing which was important to Dan, which was that the family life had some Jewish tradition. Mm-hmm. And Donna really did not respect Dan's interest in, his strong interest in the faith, not that it affected her in any way. And what she did is actually both Wendi and Dan at the beginning, when the children were in preschool, they would bring tofu, hot dogs, falafel. So in other words, non-meat meals for the children, while the other kids were having regular hot dogs, beef, which was unkosher beef, let's call it. And Donna just decided, and she told the preschool people, let the kids eat whatever you're serving. Like, she just sabotaged. And that's the whole beginning of the deterioration because of the food issues. And later on, Donna wanted the kids to move to South Florida. This becomes the two major reasons. And the two reasons, when I say that it was similar, there were three people in the marriage, and that was Donna pushing herself into Wendi and Dan's private life in such an intense degree. And that was very, very disruptive. And at the same time, I think what you're saying about Jeff Cass said, that Donna, they also try to, and this is talked about a lot today, I'm not saying for me, but to infantilize her more, so that's where Jeff would say that instead of driving herself back to see her parents in Florida, they always drove up to Florida and then drove back with her to see them in South Florida. They drove to Tallahassee.
Why did Dan file a motion to protect Donna from making disparaging comments about their fathers to their two sons, Lincoln and Benjamin? And when was that hearing supposed to be held?
That was going to be held in 2014. So I'll back up a little. So they had a terrible separation in 2012. A very difficult divorce in 2013. And after the divorce, there were a lot of kind of going back and forth on, the available times for the children to spend with the father and the mother. It was very clear it was equal. But as an example, when Wendi went out of town, she's supposed to inform Dan, and Dan, the natural parent, gets the first right. And she never did, and she would always allow Donna and Harvey to babysit. So that, excuse my language, pissed off Danny. Now, so then what happened was Donna decided that before the divorce already, this was a talk, why one of the causes of the divorce, that they all have to move to South Florida. And South Florida they're in Tallahassee, and Donna lives in Coral Springs in Florida. So like Miami area, let's call it. And this was a major disruption. So at the time of the divorce, just before it legally finalized, Wendi wrote through Donna's initiation a petition to the court to have Danny allow them to move to Florida, South Florida. Well, I would say Florida, I mean Coral Springs area, and the judge threw it out. So the judge did not allow them to move. The geographic distance that they were proposing was not something that the judge felt was good for the children. The children have two loving parents, have jobs in Florida State University, and the grandparents do not trump the natural parents' right, like Danny's, to become the caregivers. So that
this was what was so interesting about interviewing my mother about this case, is her immediate thought was, well, didn't it ever occur to this family that they could move? That they could move to Tallahassee and they could all be together? But there's one part of Donna's email where she says this judge, and she references her as a Black Christian lady, so she's already profiled her, thinks that Tallahassee is a perfectly acceptable place to live. You know better. This is my paraphrase of it. You know better. You know how great Miami is. So they would not, they're too good to live in Tallahassee. That's really the answer to that question. Janet Moorcraft, thanks so much. It's conceivable, and wouldn't it be ironic that Donna's verdict comes out on October 9th, which is Dan's birthday. Donna might think Dan's haunting her. I already think that, because isn't it interesting that Donna blames everything bad that's happening to her on Dan Markel and his ghost haunting her from the grave, and not her own actions? So, first of all, a more normal person would not commit a murder, or a more moral person, maybe a better way to put it, would not commit a murder. But wouldn't you think a more self-reflective person would say, if only I hadn't done this, if only we had come to a better solution to Wendi's problem, quote unquote. And it's not just the location, it's also, as Ruth Markel is just talking about, is asking her about, which is, it's Donna's, it's the motion Dan put through the court, that Donna be only allowed supervised visits with her grandkids because she was disparaging Dan. That would have been humiliating for Donna. And also, he was also asking the courts to sanction Wendi, and that could have been an admonishment, anything up to her losing her license, her law license, for not reporting her assets in any realistic way to the court. So I think they were worried about those things. And I think that when she says Dan's haunting me from the grave, it's because she can't see her actions. For Donna, this kind of punishment was not only something that she desperately needed to enact revenge on Dan Markel and punish him in the harshest way possible that you can, by death, to not appear in her mind a sucker, or to be suckered by him, or to not have him have any control over their lives. It was necessary in no other way. There was no other way to do it but this way in Donna's brain. It was inevitable, necessary, and the only thing that spoiled her plans was Dan Markel's ghost. What a wild way to look at it, no? But intense snobism and a need to always be in control and always have the upper hand and the last word really plays a strong part in this case.
I was bumped Donna against the wall, pushed her against the wall, and that was where she became very angry. And subsequent to that, and before that too, she would tell the children, Abba dislikes you, that your father dislikes you, and he's stupid, and we're going to take my sunshines away, and so forth. So that's when Danny, later on in 2014, decided, okay, he's going to, under the basis of their agreement, their divorce and marriage agreement, there's no disparaging of the natural parent, which he was doing. So this becomes like under parental alienation, right? Under the actual divorce laws and agreements. And he said that he was looking for Donna to have only supervised visits with the boys because of what she was saying about him, how she was disparaging him.
And that hearing was supposed to happen about a month or two before, right?
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. About 4 months. It was actually scheduled for March, but then they rescheduled it to April, May. But yes, that was important.
The question that kept coming into my mind reading. So Hunter is asking, Hunter, I don't even know how to pronounce that. Has Donna had any visitors since she's been in jail? And what was interesting about today's hearing was that the mask. So it's hard to not usual to see Donna in a surgical, one of those blue masks, those paper masks. And I don't know if she's sick. I don't know if it's hard for me to think that would be required on a Zoom hearing. But I'm wondering if she's doing that so that the public, knowing how much attention is on this case, cannot read her facial expressions. I don't know whether she's had any visitors. You would think that that Rashbaum is probably either doing a lot of phone calls with Donna, or he's in Tallahassee a lot meeting with her. Harvey, I don't know. Who would visit her? Wendi and Harvey, and maybe some of her, maybe Honeycutt, Morgan Honeycutt. I don't know. Her world. I can't imagine her fancy Miami friends wanting to make the trip to Tallahassee to visit her. Jail, the Leon County Jail is now the place to be for all society women in Miami. In your book was, had Dan moved to Miami, had he said, okay, forget the kosher, not that he would have, but forget the kosher food or whatever, I had this feeling that they would have picked something else. Do you know what I'm saying? It just seemed to be not just about control, but about a group. Like, we're the family and you're not in it, and we're going to make, do you know what I mean? I don't know. I can't explain it any more than this kind of, I don't know. I thought of them as like a royalty or something, like the Adelsons royalty, and everybody else wasn't good enough. That's what I felt reading the book and looking at other material.
I think they would have made other issues, let's call it, at the time. Look, it was highly conflictual, there's no question, but they could have resolved some of the things, right? Danny even was looking at either commuting back and forth, like taking a position, even in Miami at one time, full time, and then also could have commuted. He was prepared to be more flexible. He didn't want, even after the separation, which was a horrific experience, he wanted to still keep the family together. But I think at a certain point, Wendi had made up her mind, I think, and no matter what, Donna for sure had made up her mind, because they already called him gibbers. They had all these nicknames against him and so forth. So I think it was past the point of an agreeable resolution.
What were some of the suggestions that Donna gave Wendi to convince Dan to move the kids to Miami?
Well, she became very, very overextended, over-involved, that no matter what, if they weren't going to move there, that Wendi had to do 4 things, okay? And one of them was, and this is how nuts the whole situation became, that Wendi should tell Danny that she's going to bring the children up Catholic, okay? And that, she should dress them up in Hitler uniforms and just crazy. So that was one.
Barb Nauman, thank you so much. She writes her Botox may have worn off. Poor Donna. She barely said 2 words. I really miss the old Donna from the old hearing where she's yelling out, making faces, mouthing things. Those were the good old days. Now we have the contained. She seems pretty content. Even Donna behind a mask, barely saying 2 words. It's really a status hearing. There really hasn't been any real points to work out, just to pick a date. There's no in-person visits at Leon County Jail. Got to use the tablet or phone. Thank you, Sonny. Good to know. I would think that would not apply to her lawyer, though, right? Her lawyer should be able to meet with her anytime, right? Or is that where everyone, because of the pandemic, is still going on? Is that the reason, Sonny? We have our resident Sonny Tanner went to the trial. Tammie has become a member. Welcome aboard. Paella for you. Let me know, Sonny, if if that applies to Donna's lawyer. So Sonny Tanner, I've done one episode in Patreon. I'm finishing up the episode for my Patreon members. I have not forgotten about you. I'm sorry it's taken so long. The sound was a bit of a nightmare. It's about Wendy's podcast that she made. Bizarre podcast. Where are all Donna's friends that should be calling? Yeah, I would think nobody knows you when you're down and out. I would think that would apply here. But what I'm more curious about is I know there's 2 channels that I follow, the Society page and Carl Steinbeck have episodes coming up about this hearing. I would love to know how what they're going to talk about the hearing, because I found it very unremarkable. I didn't have much to say about it other than it's on the 30th, and I would think, and I wouldn't make any concrete plans. I wouldn't buy a non-refundable, non-exchangeable plane ticket to Tallahassee, and I would love to attend this trial. So when I know for sure when it's going to be, if it's feasible for me to do, I'd like to cover it from the courtroom. I think it's going to be a wild trial, but I hope that we get to see some more of the wild Donna, the more expressive Donna, in the same way that we saw Charlie at the defense table, so expressive, shaking his head, making faces. He's lucky that he doesn't have a more conservative judge more committed to laying down the law. His courtroom. I'm going to play maybe a little bit more of this if you guys are still interested.
Which Wendi, thank God, did not listen to. The second was where they should offer him $1 million to let the kids move to South Florida. And she proposed that they split that between Wendi and Donna and Harvey and Charlie. She knew he's not going to take money. I think it is the only times where you see, Wendi strongly, sort of not agreeing with Donna on all these major themes.
Some true crime observers have suggested that Wendi's alibi of fixing her TV has more to do, her TV being repaired the day of Dan's murder. Can you talk about that theory a little bit?
Yes, well, the theory is that on the morning of Dan's murder, It's actually who Donna arranged for a person from TV to come to fix a TV that was in her house, and that would give Wendi an alibi if she was involved with these are the theories, right? Why was there a TV person in her house? So this way Wendi has an alibi that she was home and that morning. And so that's one of the things.
And Jeffrey Lacasse says that TV was purposely broken, which I think is a detail that's not often discussed in this case the way it should. I think that's super significant, because I think that would prove the alibi theory right there. And the fact that Wendi says the boys broke it, as if they were holding hands and doing it together somehow. And we know they were really little at the time. DZ, thank you for the super sticker. Appreciate it so much. So how do the boys do it together? That's so vague and does nothing to dispel Jeffrey Lacasse's am I calling him Lacasse? Jeffrey Lacasse's, I think it's my accent, Lacasse's theory that she broke it with something sharp, that a small child could not break it that way. Very important part of the case. If I were a prosecutor building a case against Wendi, her driving by the crime scene, very hard to believe she didn't have foreknowledge there. And her disinterest, and I think that disinterest is something that's also not talked about very much in relation to this family. So Robert, we know the eldest son who estranged himself from this family, was very interested. Who did this? Who killed Dan Markel? No one else in the family had any interest. And a case could be made, the reason they had no interest in discovering who murdered Dan Markel is because they were a part of it. Certainly that's been proved with Charlie. Will it be proved with Donna? I think so. Can it be proved with Wendi? I think so. Can it be proved with Harvey? Hard to know. I'm on the fence on that one, on a case against Harvey. Do I think he was involved? Absolutely. And boy, would I love to be a fly on the wall when the planning happened. And the way I imagined it is that they all get together at Harvey and Donna's house. Wendi, Charlie, Harvey, and Donna, and they all talk about it. Something must be done. I mean, what do you think the script was to that? Well, we know the courts aren't going to go your way. It's a terrible situation. We have to do something. Something must be done. These kids cannot grow up with a religious zealot having this control and influence over children. You're going to be an outsider, Wendi, and your children are going to be an outsider. They're just going to want to talk about shul. What can be done? And then that's when probably Charlie set up and said, well, this is the way we're going to deal with it. If nobody talks, we're all going to be okay. Don't you think he gave them that line? If everybody stays silent and we have a really well thought out plan, people will suspect you, Wendi. Certainly with her police interview, she says so many times, I'm a suspect. And it seems like it was drilled in her head to say that, to be worried about this madman coming after her and her family. Little did she know little did the police know at that time that she is the madman. They're looking at it, she and her family, in my opinion. And so that she would have a reason to flee to Miami. She needs help taking care of the kids, and for the name change. I think that was all on part of the planning in this. She knew she wanted to change the kids' names, get rid of every part of Dan Markel. Unfortunately, I think she also thought she was going to profit monetarily from this, and it didn't quite work out the way she thought it would, because Dan had changed over as custodian of this trust to his sister Shelley. But Wendi was on the phone making those calls. She was also, according to a press pieces and a leak by the Tallahassee PD, she was, according to these press pieces, she was looking up Amy Adler, Dan Markel's last girlfriend, her ex-husband's name and information about him, looking for a new patsy. I really hope what you get from this interview with Ruth is she believes Donna is the driving force and really inserted herself in this family, meaning she's running the ship of the Adelson clan. She's the captain there.
Things. The TV becomes very important for another reason. I'm sure you read this already, is that Wendi says to the TV repairman when he's there, which is, again, crazy. My brother said, I'm going to give you this divorce gift, the TV, which is cheaper than hiring a hitman. So the hitman conversation comes in with a TV repairman, which is really crazy. And this poor guy has to come to the trials later and actually confirm that was the reality. So there's so many scenarios that you can. This terrible story, my grief, my experiences, being a victim are horrific, but beats fiction. I don't think anybody can even create this level of drama, intrigue, and whatever.
I really missed the boat with this story. I had no idea, and it's one of the most incredible true crime stories that I've ever encountered. Well, for one, it goes on so long. There's so many people involved, and it's so psychological. There's so many different elements, and everybody can relate to it because everybody's had a family, keeps going on.
Yeah.
And I can imagine that being extremely difficult for you. It just seems to just go on. And it seems like until everybody involved is arrested. And you originally encountered some resistance with the state's attorney. Right?
No,
not wasn't the first, not Georgia Kappelman, but wasn't his name Meg? Didn't he not want to charge?
Meg. No, let's go back.
Okay, thank you.
So this is important. I'll talk a little bit about the crime part of it. It's what's
Lakeside Lawyer. Thank you so much. I appreciate it so much. All these donations let me spend my time making content. So I appreciate it very much. So Meg's, the DA at the time, made an announcement that there would be no arrests of the Adelson family. And in retaliation, many people don't know this little part. The cops, the Tallahassee PD, released a leak to the press with the evidence, some of the evidence against the Adelson family, including Wendi's phone searches. So what was found on Donna's phone is going to be probably the biggest surprise of the trial. If we don't find out in filings beforehand, I think that will be kept as a surprise for trial if they find anything. But she certainly held on to that phone. I think that will be, if there isn't anything damning on the phone that Donna was arrested with, I think it will be a Katie McBanoa-like disappointment. So Katie McBanoa's pro offers turned out to be fairly disappointing. We wanted real information She's saying she still didn't know that Dan Markel was going to be killed. It was disappointing. She told just enough, but I don't believe she's told the whole thing. If there was nothing damning on any of the devices that were collected from Donna and Harvey's abode, I think it will be another disappointment to the community that follows this case. Certainly I'll be disappointed. And I think it'll be real disappointment if Donna gets we get a hung jury or she gets acquitted. If it's a hung jury, then I believe Georgia Kappelman will just come back and do it better, just like she did with Katie McBanoa. I don't see Donna making some kind of deal with the state. I just don't. I don't think Donna will ever admit guilt. I don't think Harvey will ever admit guilt, or Wendi. I don't see any of them making a deal, even if it's for their best interest, in their best interest. And that's why when people ask about Katie, why didn't she take the deal? Why didn't she take the deal? Because I believe she was following the directions of the Adelsons and their constant optimism. This is going to turn out great. No one's going to talk. We're going to give you the best lawyers, pay for them. All you have to do is all of us have to do is stick to a story.
It's called a murder for hire. Okay, and a murder for hire has already had 3 people now. So Garcia, who is known as the shooter,
Right.
he was arrested in May 2016 and convicted in 2019 for life.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's him. Then there's Luis Rivera, who was the driver.
Right.
And he plea bargained, and he brought in Catherine McBanoa,
Right.
who was the go-between,
Right.
who brought the money. And she was not only Garcia's, this is why I say you can write fiction, you can't beat this. So she was Garcia's, not a common law wife, let's call it, had 2 children with him.
Right.
And their marriage was up and down, and then she dated Charlie Adelson. And so that brings in the Adelson. So when all these people were arrested, here's the part with, there was a probable affidavit, okay, which named, so when Garcia's arrest happened, a probable affidavit.
Thank you, Top Cat. Top Cat 88 also, thank you for sharing that Rashbaum had canceled his interview. Hold on one second. I have to. Excuse me, I had to cough. With Deep Dive True Crime or Mentor Lawyer, and I don't believe has rescheduled it. So who knows if he's ever going to give another interview before this trial. Certainly his interview with STS podcast did not help Donna, and I don't think it painted him in any more favorable light in this community than before. I think the people that liked him still liked him after the interview, and the people like me who didn't like him liked him even less. But Top Cat says some AT&T records were recently added to Discovery. So some phone records are important in this. Interesting. And we also know, I hope I still have it up to show you guys. Hold on one second. Let me show you this. Yeah. Hold on. Let me take down your comment, Top Cat. Hold on one sec. Okay, so this was also in Discovery recently. So this is Donna's phone we're looking at here. And we're wondering who this woman is in the screen. On the screen, writing a text message saying, I think you're right about that. It would be very, very hard to get a jury in any part of Florida that didn't have preconceived And I think the end of that sentence, preconceived ideas about this case or ideas about your guilt or ideas about your involvement, I think that would be the end of that sentence. Murder by Maestro found me these are his pictures of Donna, of Morgan Honeycutt, who was Denise Williams' support person in court and also Wendy's. Is this the same person? So his theory is that woman on Donna's phone in this message is Morgan Honeycutt. Pretty interesting theory. Let me know if you've heard anything about who that woman is. Has she been identified yet?
Affidavit named Charlie Adelson and Donna Adelson as unindicted co-conspirators. Okay, so this goes back all the way to 2016. And then the state attorney's office, his name was Willie Meggs. He was still the state attorney. He was just about to retire. But the point here was he was against bringing in all the family, meaning Donna and Charlie, even at that time, at the same time that the arrests were going. And that became a controversy right in the case from day one. Why were certain people arrested only first and the others, so they didn't walk because Charlie Adelson's in jail now, but they were freer and so forth. So the case has politics. It's this heavy duty politics, this case, and it's not glitzy. And let me talk a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about the victim. Can I say that? Like
sure.
Now
please do. Actually, I have one question and then I'm not going actually right into that. So I just have one last question about Luis Rivera took plea deal in 2015. Garcia was convicted in the same trial as Katie's trial. Is that where they
for the first trial they were together in 2019. Mistrial.
Right. And she got a mistrial. Why do you think that trial ended in a mistrial? What was the difference between her getting convicted and not? You attended both trials. Was there a significant difference?
The difference were because she had young children and some of the jurors were sympathetic to the fact that, she had young children and, they weren't sure, convinced yet from their interpretation of the evidence that she should go for life. That was the first time. The second time, which is different already, and they also felt there's we have all these levels of politics here too, that the wrong people were in jail. Now, in the second trial now, which just happened in May 2022, 2022 is a big year, Charlie Adelson was arrested April 21st. So you can't use the excuse anymore about the evidence against Catherine McBanawa that it's only the low-level people were put in jail, because now we're moving to the second stage. And they, on the basis of the evidence and so on, and it was clearly presented, and there was new evidence, which she was a participant in, which is the Dolce Vita enhancement video, where she's there with Charlie Adelson. So with those new pieces of evidence, the jury had less problems at all in terms of her convictions for co-conspirator and for solicitation of murder. Life is always hard, so there was still deliberations, but she was totally convicted for everything, for life.
And you wrote 2 victim impact statements and you were allowed to read 1. What do you feel was left out? What do you feel that you wanted to express? The judge, for time reasons, allowed you to read one victim impact statement. What do you feel that you wanted to express?
No, I'll just correct you there.
Okay, thank you.
So Shelley and Dan's father, Phil, we all wrote victim impact statements. The judge, well, not even the judge, actually, the person who was Georgia Kaplan works with her, he said, look, it might be too much if the 3 of you read them. So only one of us read it. So that was for the first part. Then for the death penalty part, we had another opportunity to read the victim impact statements, but it was already where the point was where we felt as a family that should have been maybe Shelley or Phil, who might have wanted to read their impact statement for sentencing for the death penalty because they're different. And at the time, I think they declined because we were moving, right into the next phase of the trial. So that's really what happened. But I wasn't displeased that just that the family had prepared for the first time. Everybody prepared, and it's I didn't like the experience of writing a victim impact statement, because you've got to go back and revisit the wounds, and it's like opening up, everything again. This is the difficulty.
You call this book The Unveiling. It references your son's tombstone unveiling, but you also write that you want to expose trial life as a victim. What do you want people to know about what it's like as a victim to go to trial?
Well, the first part I do want to talk about the book is called The Unveiling. It's a mother's reflection on murder, grief, and trial life. So the reason the title is there's two parts, as you mentioned, but I want to not run away from the grief before I really describe the victim and the victim experience, because what happened for me is that prior to the actual ceremony of the unveiling, which was about 8-9 months after the funeral, I was in a daze. I had totally shock and had an out-of-body experience. But it was just prior to the unveiling that I started to feel the finality of the death, because the tombstone gets placed on the gravesite for the special ceremony 9 months, in our case 9 months. A fabric is put over it, and it was seeing the actual tombstone on the gravesite that made me really realize this is it. The expression, it's the last nail in the coffin. And that's when my real grief started. So that's one of the reasons. Now, symbolically, why I wrote the book and called it The Unveiling for the Public is to lift the curtain. If you can picture a piece of fabric with an inscription on a tombstone, the whole purpose is to lift the curtain and show the public, what does it feel like to be a victim in a crime situation and in a murder? We're not talking street crime alone, but in a murder. So the victim experience has two parts to it. One is psychological, and one is the criminal system. And I'm going to explain it to you. So the first part is a homicide survivor is something that is not talked about enough. Okay, homicide survivor is a specialized psychological trauma that occurs from sudden violent death and the finality of it. And it has a different course than other kinds of loss or trauma. So that's the psychological component. The second part of the victim experience is the victim is, in Canada, we have an expression about describing it. The victim is the orphan in the criminal system. What does it mean? The victim is not have a frame of reference from day one. Just look at the defendant. They go in, they give their DNA, they get all their blood work done to trace them and so forth. What happens to the victim? They're left floating. So the victim experience is a very fluid, and I would call it a foreign language in a foreign country. You don't know the terms and so forth. And then you have victim impact statements, which what people really know about. The public sees the victim impact statements, but they don't see the victim in the crime scene. They don't see the victim at the trial where you're facing the offenders and all kinds of other parts of this difficult journey. But more specifically, what's this trauma about? It's the interaction of the psychological and the legal of the criminal system. And this makes it different than any other course of trauma. And that's what I'm trying to show the public. It's not, and especially our case, it's glitzy, it's glamorous. There's been 2 hours, 2 times on Dateline to 2020. This is a real kind of well-known case if you dig, beyond, the front of Google, let's call it. But we're here, we're suffering. Then all these people from the school shootings, they're going to be suffering, those that have deaths. So I really want to talk about that whole experience.
Do you feel? Yeah, and it's something our mainstream media doesn't talk about anymore. The experience of the victims and the victim's family is not, especially victims' family experience in our courts, not talked about. This came out February 2nd, 2022, this interview, for those who are asking. And I think that also the victim's family is treated. If you go back to my work on Haymon Lee's killer, in that case, I gave one of the, I think one of the I think it's one of the longest, certainly, interviews, most thorough interviews with what happened. That was deemed a violation of victims' rights, and now his sentence, the way he was let out, was reinstated. Go back to my interview with the family's lawyer in that case. Oh, Little Smith says, "Hi, Roberta. I'm so mad at myself for missing most of your live, but I'm glad to be here now." There's always the replay. You can always catch it on the replay, Little Smith. It better late than never. We're happy to have you here. So you can hear that this is the beginning. This is where I learned about the case. I make all sorts of little errors, calling them the Adelsons instead of the Adelsons in this interview. But Ruth Markel, kudos to her for trying to express, for successfully expressing and writing about her experience. It cannot be easy, but we need more victims' families' voices out there. And part of the reason, besides our press's intense focus on making the perpetrator the victim, which is something I find really objectionable, is that many families members are not in any kind of state, are so fragile from this experience that they do not have the strength to give these interviews and relive it and go. So it takes a tremendous strength and tremendous poise, and it's really something. It takes a lot of courage to write about it and to give interviews about this kind of experience. I feel in some ways that part of the victimization continues because it becomes entertainment. It first, in some ways, becomes a 2020 special. It becomes a podcast.
No, and I think in our case, I have to say out loud, the media in our case is a privilege, and it's very helpful. And we've been having very, very collaborative relationships. There was only one time where the media, let's call it, overstretched itself with.
So that's interesting. So the Markels, if you remember, after Charlie's conviction, came out and thanked not only the mainstream media, I've never seen this happen before, but thanked the independent media, the podcasters, the people with YouTube channels, and saying yesterday, when you're in court as someone as part of the independent media, there is no love lost. I don't know if it comes from this side. I think it's mostly the mainstream media will often snub you. Not all of them, but a lot of them. There's some attitude. I think it's because many of them have been through journalism school and they learned the correct way to cover a story and feel that we have no business covering the story. Leave it to the professionals kind of attitude. Not all of them have that, but that's what I think it would come from. And I think there's also the element that it's a very competitive field and we can't help them. So there's really no advantage to being nice to us or getting to know us. We really can't help them advance should they need a job or whatever. So yeah, it's a kind of interesting, tense situation between mainstream media reporters and independent reporters in covering court cases.
Which was at the time of the funeral in Toronto, where they hid in the bushes. You know, the paparazzi had to get that picture. But that's really been our only negative. Now I have to say it's exceptional. our relationships with the media. And any, what you would call re-traumatization comes really from the trial life. It's not the media in our situation, but it's at the trials. You know, there's hearings, there's trials, there's continuances, there's changes, there's appeals. The public doesn't see all that. And Catherine was convicted, just to give you the chronology, Catherine was convicted in May 2022. In July 2022, there was sentencing. My daughter Shelley went public and she did a victim impact statement. As a mother, it's horrific to watch your child do a victim impact statement on a sibling. And I'm just showing you the behind the scenes sadness. Then after that, Catherine appeals her conviction. That's where we are right now. She's appealing. And then we have now Charlie Adelson, who was arrested, which was terrific for us. He was supposed to have a hearing December 2nd, a case management for when his trial will be in 2023, but it's now December 16th.
The delays are intense and an increase because of COVID. You also experienced alienation from your grandkids. Can you talk about that?
Yes, what happened was the first 2 years after Nanny was murdered, we did visit with Wendi and the children. And then after the arrest, Wendi cut us off. I was very concerned that it was possible that somebody in the family could be walking the children to school. And suddenly there was an arrest, and the Department of Family and Children's Services could come in and intervene. So I wanted to make sure that none of that happened. And then she cut me off. She cut us off, not just me, but she would have done anyway. And we didn't speak or see the children for 6 years. And then here's where the positive part of my journey goes from, grief to advocacy to promise to outcome. I can't believe I did it, but in 2019, what happened was, even in 2016, when we started to lose the contact with the children, our lawyers in New York, who've helped us a lot from Gibson and Dunn, Matt Benjamin said, "Ruth, you have to write a bill." I said, "Bill, I'm sitting in Toronto. I'm going to write a bill for Florida." That kind of thing. And then my other American friends, right away, "You're going to have to get it right away, a lobbyist and a this and a that." I couldn't do anything. But after Garcia's trial in 2019, I was in Tallahassee and I met this young woman. Her name is Karen Halprin Cyphers. And she came over to me and she said, as a friend, we went for coffee. She said, "What can I do for you?" And then I blurted out,
What an angel, Karen Cyphers, huh? What can I do for you? It's amazing. Just the kindness. It's pretty touching.
I was ready. Grandparent alienation. And they developed a bill in Florida, and we just had Governor DeSantis sign it in June 24th of 2022. So, here you are. You never know. So that's the better part of my journey, in terms of.
So what I understand from Karen is that they have heard from people who've been she's been heard from people who've been helped by this bill. So it doesn't affect Ruth Markel so much being Canadian, but for the people of Florida who've been touched by grandparent alienation, it's been very helpful. And what a tall order to write a bill. So kudos to Karen and Ruth for getting that done and getting that through.
There is something about resiliency. There is something about redefining yourself. There is something about taking on bigger ventures and so forth.
When did you last see your grandchildren?
Well, that became very interesting. So the bill passes the House and the Senate in March of 2022. And then Catherine McDonough's trial was supposed to be February, but it was continued to May 16th because of the opportunity that they felt they had from enhancing this video, the Dolce Vita video, which was the evidence against Charlie Adelson. So all of a sudden, at the end of February, I get an email, which I haven't heard from Wendi, and she said,
so this is the bill that Wendi says is unconstitutional. And the thought behind why Wendi let Ruth and Phil see the grandchildren is that is that she was worried about a civil suit from them and looking bad in depositions and that, and also possibly I think Charlie's trial comes into play here.
As Benjamin, the older child, is having a bar mitzvah. Now, I hadn't seen them for 6 years, and so she's saying we're all invited, which means Shelley's children as well, in May 14th, just before the trial, to this bar mitzvah. And I said, sure, we're coming. And then as we processed a little bit, I said, the kids haven't seen us. I wrote her an email. I said, can we have an ice cream visit the day before? 45 minutes. Like, I just put a time limit. Just, they're seeing these people in the back of the synagogue. Who are they? Or the temple, that kind of thing. Right. Anyway, she wrote us back, if you want an in-person visit, come in April, because this was March already. And we said, sure. And we went April 20th, and Phil and I went to see the children. We had a great visit. We got on the plane to come back to Toronto. And in the morning, 6 a.m., I get a call from the FBI. Charlie Adelson is arrested. So in 24 hours, we had 2 breakthroughs in the case.
Wow.
Which was the grandchildren and Charlie Adelson. And then what happened 3 days later, Wendi wrote us that we're disinvited to the bar mitzvah because for feelings of safety, and she was going to change the format, to Zoom and so forth. So we saw them in April, and that's been the last time that we saw them in person. And I'm hoping to go to South Florida and maybe see them sort of around the Christmas period.
She changed the children's name, she says, for safety. The safety issue is always this kind of thing that hangs over the case. Talk about an underestimation. It's bizarre. That was the thing when I went back and looked at her police interview again. You always get something new out of it. It's packed with stuff. If you're really listening, Connie, thank you. But she says so many times, are they going to come after my kids? And everyone there says, no, you have nothing to worry about. So the rational thing to do is to not listen to them at all and go and run out and change your kid's name. Craziness. Wild. But that we all know it's not what that's really about. It's really about a victory lap for the Adelson family. See, not only did we totally wipe Dan Markel off the earth, we will wipe his legacy, wipe clean his legacy as if he never existed. It's dark. Horrible. Connie, thank you so much. Wendi claimed that she cut the Markels out of the kids' lives after they tried to put my children in foster care. Connie, we just played the part where Ruth Markel talked about how that happened, where Ruth Markel was she didn't know who was going to be arrested next. She didn't want the kids. It was the exact opposite. She didn't want the kids in foster care. She knew that she wanted authorities to know that they had family in Florida and arrange for a Jewish foster care to take them for a day until she could get there and pick them up. It's so absurd. So it's like Jeffrey Lacasse says that how she lies, a little bit of truth and a lot of fiction. Wendi started cutting them off right away after Dan's murder, a provable lie. Yeah. Yep, exactly, Connie. Right on the money. Thank you for bringing up that sad part of this case's history. There's just a little bit left. I'm asked all the time, where can I find this interview? So this is this is it. This is my interview with Ruth Markel. This case. So now that everybody is talking about Katie's pro offer or what she might say, you don't have to say, but do you know anything? Are you hearing anything about that?
Nothing is happening that I can tell you. So the speculation is huge. She left the prison that she was in another area of Florida, and she's up in Tallahassee right now. And there's total speculation on everything about everything, but there has not been any movement yet on the pro offer.
You talk about Abe. Is that how you pronounce it? Anhag?
Yes. Here, let's go back. Matt Price was Danny's best man at the wedding. That's the father-in-law of Matt Price.
So, hold on. Hang on, Ruth Markel. We'll get back to Matt Price. It's Miss Lisa. Thank you so much. Had an idea as to what to call this amazing community. Chat, the Glass House. What do you all think? Interesting. We throw no stones here, except at killers and killer apologists. Yeah, interesting name. I don't know. What do you guys think? I think it's more up to you, the community, than me. Interesting. Nice idea. It's Miss Lisa. And thank you so much and thank you, moderators. It's Miss Lisa, Murder by Maestro, the Society page, Tommy DV. Thank you, moderators, for moderating the chat. I appreciate it so much.
His name is Abe Anhang, and his son, Adam Anhang, was also murdered. And he became referred to him as and if people read the book, The Unveiling, they could see it's something that you'll never see again. A murder coach, really, how he helped me. And I kept quoting him in the book at the different stages. And it was very, very significant, his support.
What was the most significant thing he told you? As someone who reports on trials, goes to trials, I found it very interesting that you wanted to sit in the front row, that you were very, very concerned about how you looked, what you said. It just blew my mind. You're being watched. You're right. You're being watched, and you have to be careful. What were some of the more valuable things that he taught you?
It was him.
Yeah, it's interesting. I work with an organization called NOVJM, the National Organization for Victims of Juvenile Murderers. I've had them all, had either victims' family members involved with that organization, or the women I interviewed the woman who founded, and I've interviewed a woman who runs the Ohio chapter quite many few times. And so much of what that organization does is give other family members, victims' family members, support. And that's really what's so important. And tips to know what to expect, to know what to do in court, to know how to deal with the press if you want to deal with the press, how to be a voice for the victim. And that's really so important, because as Ruth Markel points out in this interview, the victim has little voice in the process. And it's up to the victim's family members, with the victim's impact statements and their communications with the public and press, to be a voice for their loved one. And that's the saddest thing, is the silence, is how that voice is silenced by the killers. So it's really important to amplify these voices. And it makes me think of Wendi, and why did she change the kids' names? It's really to just totally silence Dan Markel, silence his legacy tape, so that he isn't remembered, he isn't spoken about. he's really erased. Sad and totally immoral in my view.
Is that make sure you realize you should sit in the front row, but also realize we weren't quite in the front row because the media was in front of us, but that's not the point. All the jurors are going to just be following you all the time. And that was very good advice, and it turned out to be true. So, they do observe your reactions, and you shouldn't talk too much among yourself. Not only that, but it was, in our case, it wasn't so much for the jurors also. In front of us was all the media. The first 3 rows of the court, in this case, were used for the media because they had to take, the agreement was one broadcaster would get all of the trial records, recordings, and and the visuals, but they had to share it with everybody because everybody's live streaming at the same time. So in a sense, it's an obstruction, the big equipment in front of the family to the jurors. But the real reality, another reality, is whatever you say, they're in front of you, and you can make one, or they ask you a little question, and right away it's broadcasted. So you have to be careful.
Yeah, you have to be careful. One wrong look. But of course, Charlie Adelson wanted court TV to make sure that all his looks got picked up by either the TV or most importantly, the jury. So when Georgia Kappelman would make a point, he'd be shaking his head no. Oh, that's ridiculous. Like another judge would have admonished him for that, a stricter judge. But obviously you can see the impact. I don't think it had any impact other than making him look juvenile and silly. Beverly Lawyer asks, is Jeffrey Lacasse Jewish? No, is the answer, is my belief. Not at all. But of course, he was never a serious, other people are suggesting heart of glass or through the looking glass. So that might be kind of fun to say. We're going through the looking glass, guys. Welcome today. We're going through my looking glass. I don't know. So pretty, the idea of court is that you don't influence. So Jeffrey Lacasse, it didn't really matter that he was Jewish or not, because he was never really a viable partner for Wendi. His CV wasn't shiny enough. I think he didn't have enough money for the Adelson family to be he was really just set up as the patsy. And to quote his testimony, he felt like he was being strung along. Should we just have a little Jeffrey Lacasse moment? Hold on one sec. I think this might be a nice break. And here, this is, of course, the society page's work. I still have it up. Do I still have it up? Hold on please hold, guys, while I pull this up. If I don't, just want to make sure. Oh, yeah, here we go.
Your Honor, the state calls Jeffrey Lacasse.
Jeffrey Lacasse, please.
There he is. Oh, Jeff, thank you for being here. No, seriously, Jeff, I mean it. Thank you, Jeff.
My name is Jeffrey Lacasse, Jeffrey Lacasse.
Thank you, Jeff.
Well, you seem quite sincere. What's that music?
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Jeff.
Charlie had told her that no man wants to date a single mom. So we had this conversation repeatedly. And then I show up to dinner and Charlie's dating a single mom.
Thank you, Jeff. It's so freaking scared of sexy Rex. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you.
an extremely contentious divorce.
Thank you, Jeff.
And Wendi Adelson drove me to Charlie Adelson's house, at which point I do recall observing that she was unusually jittery and being strange. I didn't know what to make of it at the time.
Thank you, Jeff.
She was a nervous wreck, and I actually traveled to the store to buy her, I believe, some Pepto-Bismol. She was such a nervous wreck. She was having stomach problems. So she wasn't food poisoned. She didn't have the flu. She wasn't sick. She was just so
I don't remember that.
nervous that she was having stomach problems.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you.
Well, you didn't go anywhere with Wendi without hearing about
No.
Dan Markel's.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
I was kind of tired of being strung along.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you. Such a from Jeff. Thank you, Jeff. You can bet that he has tons of sex. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Jeff. I'm so freaking grateful for my Jeff.
No further questions.
All right, we can release the witness. Okay, right, you're free to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm so freaking grateful for my Jeff.
Very beautiful. Thank you. Thank you.
You've been great, really. I want to thank each and every one of you for coming by. Thank you, 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 I hate doing this. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Okay, so that was, of course, the Great Society page and their video, Thank You, Jeff, which is, of course, the Late Shows. Is that what it was called? Their parody of Ariana Grande's video for Thank You Next. And they were using that as a parody to Thank You, Jeff Goldblum. But of course, for us, it's always Thank You, Jeffrey Lacasse, for being the closest to Wendi at that time before Dan Markel's murder, and telling all about the what he saw. And certainly he was very insightful and observant. Now, not everyone agrees with me. Many people say that had he should have gone to the authorities. He considered going to the authorities. I think there's that feeling when you look at this case to want to go back in time and really warn everybody and save Dan Markel. At least I have that feeling. I don't know about you guys. But this is actually, I want to just play this short by, I'm going to Murder by Maestro, and then I think we've done it for today.
I know you already testified about this, but does an innocent person say if they had any evidence?
Right. Katie's saying it's the police, and I'm saying that we're innocent. They're not going to have any evidence to show we were part of something, that we were part of it. If we had any part of this, we'd be going to the airport right now. And I
Isn't
still say
it
the
true,
same
Doctor,
thing.
that they're not going to have any evidence because you were careful?
No, because we weren't a part of this.
You were smart.
No, we weren't a part of this.
You walled yourself off from
I was
the
sure
killers.
they're not going to have evidence to show I did something I didn't do. So we're not running to the airport.
And you're untouchable, right?
Donna Adelson was arrested right here at Miami International Airport on the jetway as she was getting ready to board a one-way flight to Vietnam. That's a country without extradition to the United States. Now she's in custody in Miami, waiting to be transferred to Tallahassee.
So now, for those who are just tuning in, that was Murder by Maestro's short on the irony that Charlie Adelson claimed in his trial that his comment, if there was any evidence against us, we'd be at the airport, meaning we'd be fleeing to a non-extradition country. And what he means is, of course, we're not fleeing. He's saying, that's not what I meant at all. What I meant is if we did this, we would be fleeing. Jury didn't buy it. He was convicted in 3 hours unanimously and is now serving a life sentence. A week after, on November 13th, Donna was arrested in the Miami airport trying to board the plane to Dubai to ultimately go to Vietnam. That was the connector, Dubai. So Vietnam, a one-way ticket to Vietnam via Dubai with her husband, Harvey. And she's been in Leon County Jail since, which I can assume by Sonny Tanner's helpful comment, is still on lockdown, no visitors. And they are given tablets instead. So today we had a hearing via Zoom, which was pretty much a status hearing, and a trial date start was set for the 30th. Jury voir dire, picking the jury, start beginning on the 12th. And of course, no trial during Rosh Hashanah. So if there are no questions, I think I'm going to end it there for today. I'm really looking forward to hearing what Carl Steinbeck says. He's having a show at 8:00 on his channel tonight. I'm sure I'll be there. I'll see some of you guys there. And coming up is on the society page is also discussing Donna's hearing. So I'm looking forward. I'll be at both of those channels listening to that live, certainly. What month? September 30th. And starting on the 12th, voir dire. And I believe it will, I'm not buying my ticket yet. I believe it might be delayed. I hope not, but it might be. And thank you all for listening. Please hit the thumbs up. Leave me a comment. Might just read it. Subscribe to my Patreon. And follow me on social media, Twitter, YouTube. Write me a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. And hold on one second before I go. Else think so. And that is it. I'll see you guys back here Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern. Have a great night, everybody.